Please, sir, can you read this letter? It's very, very important. The trembling voice of a 7-year-old little girl echoed through the imposing silence of the corporate lobby, her small hands clutching a wrinkled envelope as if it were her most precious treasure. Can you imagine a child crossing the city alone with such determination? Behind the little girl's crystal blue eyes, there was a determination that defied her young age. She had crossed the city alone, faced the public transportation system, and arrived there guided only by a dying mother's desperate hope. Dorothy wasn't just fragile. She was brave beyond her years. Kevin Barton, a 33-year-old millionaire CEO, reigned over his technological empire with an iron fist and an armored heart. Known for his coldness in business and emotional detachment, he had built walls so high around his personal life that even he could no longer scale them. But something about this urgent letter from a child intrigued him. When Kevin met the little girl who had interrupted his day, the world stopped. Dorothy's blue eyes were a perfect mirror of his own, the shape of her face, the way she tilted her head when thinking. Every detail screamed an impossible truth that he had believed himself sterile for years. What secrets could a single letter reveal to shatter a man's world? The receptionist held her breath. Security guards exchanged confused glances. Even the executives passing by slowed their pace, sensing that something extraordinary was happening in that ordinary lobby. Susan Osborne, Kevin's girlfriend, watched from the elevator entrance, her face paling as she noticed the undeniable resemblance between the man she loved and the unknown child. This isn't just a story about lost and found love. It's about the courage of a child who decided to fight for her family, about second chances that arrive disguised as wrinkled letters, and about how sometimes the most important things in life come in the smallest packages. Kevin Barton was about to discover that his entire life had been built on lies. But was Nancy Cromwell really telling the truth about Dorothy? And what would Susan do to protect the relationship she had spent years building? Some letters change destinies, and this one was about to rewrite 3 lives forever. The morning mist clung to the towering glass facade of Barton Tech Industries like a shroud, casting ethereal shadows across the bustling streets of downtown Seattle. 7-year-old Dorothy Cromwell stood at the base of the 40-story building, her small fingers clutching a wrinkled envelope against her chest. Her golden hair caught the filtered sunlight streaming through the clouds, and her piercing blue eyes reflected a determination that seemed far too mature for her young face. The lobby of Barton Tech buzzed with the controlled chaos of corporate life. Men and women in expensive suits hurried past marble pillars, their heels clicking against the polished floors like a symphony of ambition. Dorothy approached the imposing reception desk where a woman with perfectly styled auburn hair and a crisp navy blazer sat behind a computer screen. "Excuse me, ma'am," Dorothy said, her voice barely above a whisper as she stood on her tiptoes to see over the desk. The receptionist, Margaret Harrison, looked down with surprise at the unexpected visitor. "Well, hello there, sweetheart," Margaret said, her professional demeanor softening instantly. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" Dorothy shook her head vigorously, her blonde curls bouncing. "I'm not lost. I need to give this letter to the most important man in this building. Mommy said it's very, very important." She held up the envelope with both hands as if presenting a sacred offering. Margaret glanced around the lobby, uncertain how to handle this unusual situation. "What's your name, honey?" "Dorothy Cromwell. And this letter is for the boss man. Mommy wrote it and she said I had to make sure he reads it today because Dorothy's voice wavered slightly because she might not be able to write any more letters. Soon. The innocence in Dorothy's voice coupled with the gravity of her words sent a chill down Margaret's spine. She looked at the envelope, noticing the careful handwriting that spelled out Kevin Barton, CEO, urgent and personal in elegant script. "Sweetie, Mr. Barton is a very busy man. He's in meetings all day." "And please," Dorothy interrupted, her blue eyes filling with tears that she refused to let fall. "Mommy said this is the most important letter she's ever written. She said it might save both of us." Margaret felt her heart constrict. Something about this little girl's desperation resonated with her maternal instincts. Against all company protocol, she picked up her phone and dialed Kevin Barton's direct line. 40 floors above, Kevin Barton sat in his corner office, a monument to success in isolation. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Elliott Bay, but Kevin rarely noticed the beauty beyond the glass. His dark hair was impeccably styled, his charcoal gray suit pressed to perfection, and his steel blue eyes focused intently on quarterly reports spread across his mahogany desk. At 33, Kevin had built Barton Tech from a small software startup into one of Seattle's most successful technology companies. But success had come at a cost. His office felt more like a fortress than a workplace, designed to keep the world at a safe distance. The walls were lined with awards and accolades, but conspicuously absent of any personal photographs or mementos that might hint at a life beyond corporate achievement. His phone buzzed, interrupting his concentration. "Mr. Barton," Margaret's voice came through the intercom. "I have an unusual situation down here. There's a little girl who insists on delivering a letter to you personally. She says it's urgent." Kevin's jaw tightened with irritation. "Margaret, you know I don't have time for sir. With all due respect, I think you should see this child. There's something different about this situation. The letter is marked personal and urgent, and she seems genuinely distressed." Kevin closed his eyes and rubbed his temples, feeling the familiar tension headache beginning to form. His day was already packed with back-to-back meetings, and he had no patience for interruptions, especially ones involving children. But Margaret had been with the company for 8 years and had never made such a request before. "Fine," he said curtly, "send her up, but make it quick." As Margaret escorted Dorothy to the executive elevator, the little girl's eyes widened with wonder at the opulent lobby. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow patterns on the walls, and abstract artwork worth more than most people's annual salaries adorned every corner. But Dorothy wasn't intimidated by the grandeur. She was focused solely on her mission. The elevator ride to the 40th floor felt like an eternity. Dorothy pressed her face against the glass wall of the elevator, watching Seattle shrink below her. "It's like being in the clouds," she whispered to Margaret, who smiled despite her nervousness about breaking protocol. When the elevator doors opened with a soft chime, Dorothy found herself in an executive suite that looked more like a luxury hotel than an office space. Thick Persian rugs covered polished hardwood floors and original oil paintings hung between mahogany-paneled walls. Margaret led her down a corridor lined with conference rooms, each equipped with the latest technology. "Mr. Barton's office is just through those doors," Margaret said gently, pointing to a set of imposing double doors at the end of the hallway. "Remember, he's very busy, so try to be brief, okay?" Dorothy nodded solemnly and walked toward the doors with the measured steps of someone carrying the weight of the world on their small shoulders. She raised her tiny fist and knocked 3 times, the sound echoing in the quiet corridor. "Come in," came a deep authoritative voice from within. Dorothy pushed open the heavy door and stepped into Kevin Barton's domain. The office was even more impressive than the rest of the suite. With a massive desk positioned strategically in front of windows that offered a commanding view of the Seattle skyline. Behind the desk sat a man who looked like he had stepped out of a business magazine cover. Kevin looked up from his computer screen, prepared to deal with yet another interruption to his carefully scheduled day. But when his eyes fell on Dorothy, something unexpected happened. The irritated expression on his face froze, replaced by something that looked almost like recognition, though he couldn't understand why. The little girl standing in his doorway had the most startling blue eyes he had ever seen, eyes that seemed to mirror his own with uncanny precision. Her golden hair caught the light from his desk lamp, and there was something about the shape of her face, the determined set of her small jaw that seemed hauntingly familiar. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Kevin found himself studying Dorothy's features with an intensity that surprised him, while Dorothy stood frozen in the doorway, suddenly aware of the gravity of the moment her mother had prepared her for. "Are you the boss man?" Dorothy finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper in the vast office. Kevin cleared his throat, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had overcome him. "I'm Kevin Barton, the CEO of this company. You must be the little girl with the letter." Dorothy nodded and walked across the plush carpet toward his desk, her small sneakers silent on the thick fibers. She held out the envelope with both hands as if presenting a sacred offering. "Mommy wrote this for you," she said. "She said it's very, very important and that you have to read it right now." Dorothy's eyes never left his face as she spoke, searching for something she couldn't name. Kevin took the envelope, noting how the paper felt slightly damp from Dorothy's nervous perspiration. The handwriting on the front was elegant but shaky, as if written by someone fighting against physical weakness. Something about that handwriting tugged at a memory buried deep in his mind, but he couldn't quite place it. He opened the envelope carefully, aware that Dorothy was watching his every movement with intense concentration. As he unfolded the letter, a faint scent of lavender wafted up from the paper, a fragrance that sent an unexpected jolt of recognition through his system. The letter was written on pale blue stationery, the kind Nancy had always favored during their time together. Kevin's hands trembled slightly as he began to read. "Dear Kevin, if you're reading this, it means Dorothy found her way to you. She's such a brave girl, our daughter. Yes, our daughter. I know this must be a shock, but Dorothy is your child. She was conceived during our last weekend together before everything fell apart. I tried to tell you when I found out I was pregnant, but you wouldn't see me. You believed the lies about my diagnosis and pushed me away. For 8 years, I've raised her alone, watching her grow into an amazing little girl who looks more like you every day. Her blue eyes, her determination, her quick mind, they're all from you. But now, time is running out for me. The cancer is back, and the doctors say I have only weeks left. I can't bear the thought of Dorothy going into foster care or being raised by strangers. She needs her father. Please, Kevin, for the sake of the love we once shared, take care of our daughter. Show her the kindness I know is still in your heart, buried beneath the walls you've built. With all my remaining love, Nancy." Kevin read the letter twice, his face draining of color with each passing word. The room seemed to spin around him as memories of his time with Nancy flooded back. Their whirlwind romance 8 years ago, the passionate weekends, the plans they had made for a future together. And then the devastating news of her cancer diagnosis, the doctor's report that said she had only months to live. He had ended things, unable to face the pain of losing her. But according to this letter, it had all been a lie? Dorothy watched him carefully, her small hands clasped together in front of her. "Is everything okay, mister?" she asked softly. Kevin looked up from the letter, really looking at Dorothy for the first time. The resemblance was undeniable. She had Nancy's golden hair, but everything else, the shape of her eyes, the curve of her smile, it was like looking at a miniature version of himself. "Dorothy," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Is your mommy's name Nancy?" Dorothy nodded solemnly. "Nancy Cromwell. She said you knew her a long time ago." Kevin stood up slowly, walking around his desk to kneel in front of Dorothy. For the first time in years, tears welled up in his eyes. "She was right," he whispered. "I did know her. And if what she says is true, then..." He couldn't finish the sentence, overwhelmed by the implications. Dorothy reached out and patted his hand awkwardly, the way a child might comfort a sad animal. "Mommy said you might be surprised. She said to tell you that she forgives you for not believing her before." Kevin pulled Dorothy into a gentle hug, feeling her small arms wrap around his neck. In that moment, the walls he had built around his heart began to crack. But as father and daughter shared their first embrace, neither of them noticed Susan Osborne standing in the doorway, her face a mask of shock and calculation as she processed the scene before her. The truth was out, but the storm was just beginning. The executive floor of Barton Tech was unusually quiet as Margaret led Dorothy back to the reception area after her meeting with Kevin. The little girl's face was a mixture of confusion and hope, her small hand clutching Margaret's tightly. "Did I do good?" Dorothy asked, looking up at the receptionist with wide eyes. Margaret smiled warmly, kneeling down to Dorothy's level. "You did wonderfully, sweetheart. Mr. Barton seemed very moved by your letter." As they reached the lobby, a sleek black town car pulled up to the curb outside. The driver, a middle-aged man with kind eyes, emerged and opened the rear door. "Miss Dorothy," he called gently. "Your mother sent me to pick you up." Dorothy's face lit up. "That's Mr. Thompson. He's Mommy's friend from church. He sometimes drives us when Mommy's too tired." Margaret watched as Dorothy skipped toward the car, her backpack bouncing on her small shoulders. The driver helped her in, and as the car pulled away, Margaret couldn't shake the feeling that she had just witnessed the beginning of something extraordinary. Back in his office, Kevin sat staring at the letter, his mind racing. The scent of lavender still lingered in the air, bringing back memories he had long suppressed. Nancy. Beautiful, vibrant Nancy. How had everything gone so wrong? His thoughts were interrupted by a sharp knock at the door. Before he could respond, Susan Osborne strode in, her designer heels clicking authoritatively on the hardwood floor. At 31, Susan was a vision of corporate elegance, her dark hair pulled into a perfect chignon, her tailored red suit accentuating her athletic figure. As Kevin's girlfriend of 2 years and Barton Tech's chief financial officer, she was used to having unrestricted access to his office and his life. "Kevin, darling," she said, her voice honeysweet but with an undercurrent of steel. "I just saw the most peculiar thing. A little girl leaving your office?" Kevin quickly folded the letter and slipped it into his desk drawer. "It was nothing. Just a child who got lost and ended up here with a letter for me." Susan's green eyes narrowed slightly as she perched on the edge of his desk, crossing her long legs. "A letter? From a child? That's unusual, even for you." Kevin forced a laugh, trying to deflect her curiosity. "Probably some school project or charity thing. I didn't even read it. Threw it away." The lie came easily, but Susan wasn't convinced. She had built her career on spotting inconsistencies in financial reports, and she applied the same scrutiny to personal matters. "Really? Because from what I saw, you seemed quite emotional when she left." Kevin stood up abruptly, moving to the window to avoid her gaze. "You're imagining things, Susan." It was just a brief interruption. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a conference call in 5 minutes." Susan slid off the desk, smoothing her skirt. "Of course. But remember, we have dinner reservations at 8. Don't be late." As she left the office, Susan's mind was already racing. She had noticed the resemblance between Kevin and the child immediately. The blue eyes, the determined chin. It was uncanny. Pulling out her phone, she dialed a number she kept for emergencies. "Frank? It's Susan. I need you to look into something for me. A woman named Nancy Cromwell and her daughter Dorothy. Find out everything, especially any connection to Kevin Barton." Frank Dawson, her private investigator, responded immediately. "On it, Ms. Osborne." "Timeline?" "Yesterday," Susan snapped before hanging up. She wasn't about to let some ghost from Kevin's past ruin everything she had built. Meanwhile, across town in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, Nancy Cromwell lay in her hospital bed that had been set up in the living room. At 32, cancer had ravaged her once vibrant body, leaving her frail and pale. But her blue eyes, identical to Dorothy's, still burned with determination. The door burst open as Dorothy rushed in, her face flushed with excitement. "Mommy! I did it! I gave him the letter." Nancy managed a weak smile, patting the bed beside her. "Come here, my brave girl. Tell me everything." As Dorothy recounted her adventure, from the bus ride to the tall building to her meeting with the boss man, Nancy listened intently, her mind drifting back to her time with Kevin 8 years ago. They had met at a tech conference where Nancy was working as an event coordinator. Their connection had been instant and intense. For 3 months, they were inseparable, talking about marriage and children. Then came the diagnosis. Or what Kevin believed was the diagnosis. Nancy had never been sick. It had all been a carefully orchestrated lie, but not one of her making. As Dorothy finished her story, Nancy hugged her daughter close. "You did perfectly, sweetheart. Now we wait and see if he believes us." But even as she comforted her child, Nancy's thoughts turned dark. She knew Susan would be a problem. The woman had too much to lose if the truth came out. And Nancy was running out of time to protect her daughter from what was coming. The sun was setting over Seattle as Susan Osborne sat in her luxurious condominium overlooking Lake Union, a glass of Merlot in hand. Her laptop screen glowed with the preliminary report from Frank Dawson. What she read made her blood run cold. Nancy Cromwell, 32, single mother to Dorothy Cromwell, age 7. Former event coordinator. Diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer 3 months ago. Prognosis, terminal. But it was the next line that made Susan set down her wineglass with a trembling hand. Dorothy's birth certificate lists no father, but birth date aligns perfectly with Nancy's relationship with Kevin Barton 8 years ago. DNA probability based on physical resemblance, high. Susan's mind raced. This changed everything. If the child was Kevin's, it could jeopardize not only their relationship but her position at Barton Tech. She had carefully cultivated her role as Kevin's indispensable partner, both personally and professionally. A secret child would complicate things immensely. Picking up her phone, she dialed Frank again. I need more. Dig deeper. Find something I can use. What kind of something? Frank asked. Anything that makes her look unfit. Criminal record, financial problems, something. As she hung up, Susan stared out at the twinkling city lights. She hadn't come this far to lose everything to a dying woman and her brat. Whatever it took, she would protect her future. Even if it meant destroying someone else's. Back in Kevin's penthouse, he sat in the darkness of his study, the letter from Nancy spread out before him under the soft glow of his desk lamp. He had read it a dozen times, each reading bringing new waves of emotion, shock, anger, regret, and an overwhelming sense of loss for the years he had missed with his daughter. His daughter. The words still felt surreal. Kevin's hand trembled as he reached for his phone. He needed answers. He needed to see Nancy. But as he began to dial the number written at the bottom of the letter, a text message flashed on his screen from Susan. Can't wait for dinner tonight. We have so much to discuss about our future. Love you. Kevin set the phone down, conflicted. How could he face Susan knowing what he now knew? But more importantly, how could he face Nancy after abandoning her based on lies? As the city lights twinkled outside his window, Kevin Barton realized that his carefully constructed world was about to come crashing down. And the little girl with blue eyes just like his was the unwitting architect of its destruction. The next morning dawned gray and rainy, mirroring the turmoil in Kevin's mind. He had barely slept, his thoughts consumed by Nancy's letter and the little girl who had delivered it. As he dressed for work, his usual routine felt mechanical, his mind elsewhere. Arriving at Barton Tech, Kevin was surprised to find Susan waiting in his office, 2 coffees in hand and a concerned expression on her face. You look like you didn't sleep, she said, handing him a cup. Everything okay? Kevin forced a smile, accepting the coffee. Just a long night. Nothing to worry about. But Susan was already moving on, her tablet open to the latest financial reports. We have the quarterly meeting at 10, and then lunch with the investors from Tokyo. Oh, and don't forget our dinner reservation tonight at Canlis. It's our 2-year anniversary, remember? Kevin nodded absently, his mind drifting back to Dorothy's visit. The resemblance was too striking to ignore. He needed to know the truth. Susan, he said suddenly. Do you remember Nancy Cromwell? From years ago? Susan's hand froze midway to her coffee cup. She recovered quickly, but Kevin noticed the slight tremor. Nancy? That girl you dated briefly before we met? Why bring her up now? No reason, Kevin lied. Just random memory. Susan's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. As soon as she left his office, she texted Frank, double the effort. I need dirt on Nancy now. Across town, Nancy lay in her bed, weaker than the day before. Dorothy sat beside her, reading from her favorite book. Mommy, when will the boss man come? Dorothy asked, closing the book. Nancy stroked her daughter's hair. Soon, baby. I hope soon. But as the hours ticked by, Nancy's hope began to fade. Had Kevin ignored the letter? Or worse, not believed it? She didn't have much time left to wait. By midday, Kevin could no longer focus on work. He canceled his meetings and left the office, telling his assistant he had personal business to attend. Following the address on the letter, he drove to Capitol Hill, his luxury sedan looking out of place in the modest neighborhood. Standing outside the apartment building, Kevin hesitated. What if it was all a lie? What if Dorothy wasn't his? But those eyes. Steeling himself, he knocked on the door. Dorothy answered, her face lighting up with recognition. You're the boss man. You came. She pulled him inside before he could speak. Nancy looked up from her bed, her eyes meeting Kevin's for the first time in 8 years. Kevin, she whispered. You came. Kevin approached slowly, taking in Nancy's frail appearance. Nancy, is it true? Is Dorothy your daughter? Yes. Nancy's voice was weak but certain. I never lied to you, Kevin. Not about the pregnancy, not about anything. Kevin sat down heavily in a nearby chair, his world tilting on its axis. But the diagnosis, the doctor's report. Nancy's eyes filled with regret. It was fake. All of it. But not by me. Susan. Kevin's blood ran cold. Susan? What does Susan have to do with this? Nancy took a labored breath. She orchestrated everything. The fake report, the lies about my condition. She wanted you for herself, Kevin. And she was willing to destroy our lives to get you. As Nancy revealed the full extent of Susan's manipulation, Kevin felt his world crumble. The woman he had trusted, shared his life with, had been the architect of his greatest loss. Meanwhile, at Barton Tech, Susan paced her office, phone in hand. Frank's report had just arrived, and what it revealed made her smile coldly. Nancy had financial problems, mounting medical bills, and a history of unstable relationships. Perfect leverage. But as she planned her next move, she had no idea that Kevin was learning the truth about her betrayal. The confrontation was coming, and when it did, it would change everything. The small apartment in Capitol Hill felt even smaller as Kevin sat beside Nancy's bed, listening to her recount the events of 8 years ago. Dorothy played quietly in the corner with her dolls, occasionally glancing at the adults with curious eyes. After you broke things off, Nancy said weakly, I tried to contact you. Calls, letters, even showed up at your office. But Susan always intercepted. Kevin's hands clenched into fists. She told me you were dying. Showed me medical reports. Nancy nodded. Forged. All of it. Susan had connections in the medical field from her previous job. She created a whole fake medical history for me. Why? Kevin whispered. Why go to such lengths? Nancy's eyes softened with pity. Because she wanted you. And what Susan wants, she takes. By any means necessary. Kevin stood up, pacing the small room. I need proof. I can't just. Nancy pointed to a drawer in the nightstand. Top drawer. Blue folder. Kevin opened it, finding a stack of documents, emails from Susan to a doctor friend discussing the creation of fake records, bank statements showing payments for services rendered, even a recorded phone conversation where Susan admitted to the scheme. How did you get all this? Kevin asked, stunned. Nancy managed a weak smile. When I realized what had happened, I hired a private investigator. Cost me everything I had, but I needed to know why you abandoned us. Kevin collapsed back into the chair, the weight of 8 lost years crashing down on him. I have a daughter, he whispered. And I missed everything. Dorothy approached timidly, placing her small hand on Kevin's knee. It's okay, mister. Mommy says better late than never. Kevin looked at his daughter, really seeing her for the first time. He pulled her into a gentle hug, tears streaming down his face. I'm so sorry, he whispered to both of them. Back at Barton Tech, Susan's phone buzzed with a text from Kevin, we need to talk. Now. Her heart raced as she made her way to his office. Kevin sat behind his desk, the blue folder open before him. What's this about? Susan asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Kevin slid the folder across the desk. Explain this. Susan's face paled as she scanned the documents. This is fabricated. Someone's trying to frame me. Kevin stood up, his voice cold. I heard the recording, Susan. Your voice. admitting everything. Susan's composure cracked. Kevin, I did it for us. Nancy was going to drag you down. I saved you. Saved me? Kevin roared. You stole 8 years with my daughter. Susan's eyes widened. Your daughter? Yes. Dorothy is mine. And you knew, didn't you? That's why you did all this. Susan backed away, realizing the game was over. Kevin, please. You're fired, Kevin said flatly. And if you ever come near my family again, I'll make sure you face criminal charges. As security escorted Susan out, she seethed with rage. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. That night, Kevin stayed with Nancy and Dorothy, helping with dinner and bedtime stories. As Dorothy fell asleep between them, Nancy took Kevin's hand. I forgive you, she whispered. Now forgive yourself. Kevin kissed her forehead. I love you, Nancy. Both of you. But as they drifted off to sleep, neither knew that Susan was already plotting her revenge, determined to destroy the family she had kept apart for so long. The Barton family home, once a cold penthouse, now echoed with the sounds of recovery and reconnection. Nancy's chemotherapy sessions had begun, and while the side effects were grueling, the hope of remission kept them going. Kevin had transformed one of the guest rooms into a comfortable recovery space for Nancy, complete with medical equipment and a beautiful view of the city. Dorothy skipped through the halls, her laughter a balm for years of silence in the expansive home. Daddy, look what I drew, she exclaimed one afternoon, holding up a crayon masterpiece of their family. Kevin knelt down, examining the drawing with mock seriousness. This is museum quality, kiddo. We'll have to frame it. As Dorothy beamed, Kevin's phone buzzed. It was his lawyer. Mr. Barton, we have a problem. Susan Osborne has filed a wrongful termination lawsuit. And she's claiming she has evidence of company fraud. Kevin's jaw tightened. Handle it. Whatever it takes. But Susan wasn't content with legal battles. She had spent weeks digging into Nancy's medical records, bribing a hospital administrator for access. What she found made her smile coldly. Nancy's cancer wasn't as advanced as claimed. In fact, with proper treatment, her prognosis was good. But Susan saw an opportunity. Anonymously, she leaked altered records to the press, suggesting Nancy had faked her illness for sympathy and financial gain. The story exploded. Headlines screamed, CEO's long-lost love, cancer hoax exposed? Kevin rushed to the hospital where Nancy was receiving treatment. It's not true, Nancy insisted weakly. I would never. I know, Kevin said, holding her hand. This has Susan written all over it. Dorothy, overhearing from the doorway, clenched her small fists. That mean lady is lying about Mommy. As the media storm raged, Kevin held a press conference. The allegations against Nancy are false and malicious. We have evidence of tampering, and we will pursue legal action against those responsible. But the damage was done. Investors pulled out, stock prices plummeted, and Barton Tech teetered on the brink of collapse. Susan watched from her new apartment, a glass of wine in hand. If she couldn't have Kevin, no one would. Little did she know, Dorothy had decided to take matters into her own small hands once again. The little girl who had delivered a life-changing letter was about to deliver justice. The media frenzy surrounding Barton Tech reached fever pitch. Paparazzi camped outside the hospital, shouting questions at anyone who entered or exited. Inside Nancy's room, the family huddled together, trying to shield Dorothy from the chaos. Why are people being mean to Mommy? Dorothy asked, her blue eyes wide with confusion. Kevin lifted her onto his lap. Sometimes grown-ups do bad things because they're hurt inside. But we're going to fix this. Nancy, weakened by her latest chemo session, managed to smile. Your daddy's right, sweetie. Truth always wins in the end. But as days passed, the pressure mounted. Kevin spent long nights in his home office, poring over company documents with his legal team, searching for a way to counter Susan's attacks. Susan, meanwhile, had gone underground, using anonymous sources to feed more damaging information to the press. False claims of financial impropriety at Barton Tech, hints of insider trading, each new allegation chipping away at Kevin's empire. One evening, as Kevin tucked Dorothy into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, I have an idea." Kevin smiled indulgently. "What's that, princess? Remember how I brought Mommy's letter to you? Maybe I can bring a letter to the news people. Tell them the truth." Kevin's smile faded as he considered her words. It was risky, exposing a child to the media spotlight, but Dorothy's innocence might be the key to cutting through the lies. The next day, Kevin arranged a special interview with a trusted journalist. Dorothy, dressed in her favorite blue dress, sat between her parents, facing the camera with the same determination she had shown in Kevin's lobby months ago. "My mommy is really sick," Dorothy said clearly. "But she's the bravest person I know. The mean lady is telling lies because she's mad at my daddy." The interview went viral. Dorothy's earnest words and innocent face touched hearts across the nation. Public opinion shifted dramatically. Support poured in for the Barton family, while calls for investigation into Susan's claims grew louder. Frank Dawson, Susan's private investigator, turned on her, providing evidence of her manipulations to the authorities. Within days, Susan was arrested for fraud, defamation, and conspiracy. As she was led away in handcuffs, she caught a glimpse of the Barton family on a news screen, united and strong. In the end, it was a child's simple truth that defeated years of deception. With Susan behind bars and the truth revealed, Barton Tech began to recover. Investors returned, stock prices stabilized, and Kevin implemented new ethical guidelines inspired by his family's ordeal. Nancy's treatment was working. The cancer was in full remission. On a crisp December evening just 2 weeks before Dorothy's 8th birthday, Kevin found himself pacing nervously in their bedroom while Nancy helped Dorothy with her homework at the kitchen table. Hidden in his nightstand drawer was a small velvet box that had been burning a hole in his consciousness for weeks. "Daddy, you're walking funny?" Dorothy observed when he emerged from the bedroom for the third time in 10 minutes. "Are your feet okay?" Nancy looked up from Dorothy's math worksheet, noting Kevin's obvious nervousness with amusement. "Yes, Daddy, are your feet okay?" Kevin took a deep breath, realizing that his elaborate plans for a romantic proposal seemed silly in the face of the simple, genuine love that filled their home every day. "Actually, my feet are fine, but my heart is very full." Dorothy tilted her head with curiosity. "What does that mean?" Kevin knelt down beside Dorothy's chair, pulling the small velvet box from his pocket. "It means that I love you and your mommy more than I ever thought it was possible to love anyone, and I was wondering if you would help me ask your mommy a very important question." Dorothy's eyes widened with excitement as she saw the ring box. "Is that what I think it is?" "That depends on what you think it is," Kevin said, grinning at his daughter's enthusiasm. "It's a ring for mommy. You're going to ask her to marry you." Dorothy practically bounced in her chair with excitement. Nancy covered her mouth with her hands, tears already forming in her eyes as she watched the two most important people in her world share this moment. "Dorothy," Kevin said seriously, "I need to ask you something first. Would it be okay with you if I married your mommy? Would you want me to be your daddy forever and always, legally and officially?" Dorothy launched herself into Kevin's arms, nearly knocking him over with the force of her enthusiasm. "Yes, yes, yes. I want you to be my daddy forever, and I want you to marry mommy so we can all have the same last name." Kevin stood up, still holding Dorothy, and turned to face Nancy, who was watching them through tears of joy. "Nancy Cromwell," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. 8 years ago, I thought I lost you forever. 3 months ago, I discovered that the best parts of my life were waiting for me to be brave enough to claim them." He set Dorothy down and took Nancy's hands in his, the ring box balanced carefully in his palm. "Nancy, you are the strongest, most beautiful, most incredible woman I have ever known. You raised our daughter to be brilliant and kind and fearless. You fought for your life so you could be there for her. You forgave me for doubting you and welcomed me into the family you had built with such love and determination." Nancy was crying openly now, but her smile was radiant. "Kevin, Nancy, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making up for the years we lost? Will you let me be the husband you deserve and the father Dorothy needs? Yes, Nancy whispered, then louder. Yes, of course. Yes. Kevin slipped the ring onto Nancy's finger, a stunning solitaire diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the light from every angle. Dorothy clapped her hands with delight, dancing around the kitchen table in celebration. We're going to be a real family, Dorothy sang. We're going to be the Bartons. As Kevin kissed Nancy, sealing their engagement and their commitment to the future they would build together, Dorothy continued her celebratory dance, already making plans for the wedding, for the family they would become, for all the adventures that lay ahead. 6 months later, on a perfect June day overlooking Elliott Bay, Kevin and Nancy were married in a small ceremony attended by close friends and family. Dorothy served as the flower girl, wearing a dress the exact shade of blue as her eyes and carrying a bouquet of white roses. She had insisted on being part of the ceremony in every way possible, even writing her own vows to both her parents about how happy she was to finally have a complete family. Dr. Harrison, who had become not just Kevin's physician but a close family friend, officiated the ceremony. In his remarks, he spoke about the power of truth to heal old wounds and the importance of never giving up on love, even when it seems lost forever. Susan Osborne was notably absent, serving a prison sentence for fraud and conspiracy charges related to the tampering of medical records. Her elaborate scheme to destroy Kevin and Nancy's relationship had ultimately been her downfall, exposing a pattern of manipulation and criminal behavior that extended far beyond their situation. As Kevin and Nancy exchanged vows, promising to love and protect each other through whatever challenges life might bring, Dorothy stood beside them with tears of happiness streaming down her young face. This little girl, who had been brave enough to deliver a letter that changed everything, had finally gotten the family she had always dreamed of. In his vows, Kevin spoke directly to Dorothy as well as to Nancy. Dorothy, you came into my life carrying a letter from your mother, but you brought me so much more than that. You brought me purpose, joy, and the chance to be the father I always hoped I could be. I promise you that I will never let anything or anyone separate our family again. Nancy's vows were equally emotional. Kevin, 8 years ago, we lost each other to lies and misunderstandings, but our love created something beautiful, our daughter Dorothy, who brought us back together. I promise to trust in our love, to communicate openly and honestly, and to build the future we should have had all along. After the ceremony, as the small wedding party celebrated with dinner and dancing on the terrace of Kevin's penthouse, Dorothy pulled both her parents aside for a private moment. Mommy, Daddy, she said seriously. I have something important to tell you. Kevin and Nancy exchanged amused glances, wondering what profound observation their 8-year-old daughter was about to share. What is it, sweetheart? Nancy asked. Dorothy took both their hands in her small ones, her expression solemn. I'm glad I was brave enough to take that letter to Daddy's office. I was really scared that day, but Mommy always says that being brave means doing the right thing, even when you're scared. Kevin knelt down to Dorothy's level, his heart full of pride and love for this remarkable child. Dorothy, you are the bravest person I know. If you hadn't delivered that letter, we might never have found each other again. The letter was important, Dorothy agreed. But I think love was more important. Love made you come see us. Love made you help Mommy get better. Love made us into a family. Nancy wiped tears from her eyes as she listened to her daughter's wisdom. You're absolutely right, sweetheart. Love was the most important thing of all. As the sun set over Seattle, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink, the Barton family stood together on their terrace, looking out over the city where their story had unfolded. Dorothy was right. It had been love that brought them together, love that sustained them through the challenges, and love that would carry them into whatever future awaited them. Kevin wrapped his arms around his wife and daughter, marveling at how completely his life had changed from that morning when a small blonde girl had walked into his office with a wrinkled envelope and an unshakable determination to reunite her family. What are you thinking about, Daddy? Dorothy asked, noticing his contemplative expression. I'm thinking about how sometimes the most important things come in the smallest packages, Kevin replied, squeezing her gently. And I'm thinking about how grateful I am that you were brave enough to deliver your mother's letter. Dorothy smiled up at him with the wisdom of a child who had seen her wishes come true through courage and persistence. Mommy always says that good things happen to people who don't give up. We didn't give up on being a family, did we? No, sweetheart, Nancy said, joining their embrace as the first stars began to appear in the darkening sky. We never gave up, and now we have forever to be together. As the Barton family headed inside to continue their celebration, Dorothy skipped ahead of her parents, her voice carrying back to them on the evening breeze. Tomorrow I'm going to write letters, too. Letters to my friends telling them about my wedding and my new daddy and how dreams really do come true if you're brave enough to make them happen. Kevin and Nancy exchanged a look of pure happiness, knowing that their daughter, their brave, wise, wonderful daughter, would indeed make her dreams come true. Just as she had made theirs come true with one very important letter on one very ordinary Tuesday morning that had turned out to be the most extraordinary day of their lives. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this beautiful love story. Let us know what you thought of this tale full of emotions and surprises. Tell us your name, where you're watching from, and rate this story from 0 to 10 if it touched your heart. And if you enjoyed the plot, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the amazing new stories coming soon. See you next time.